Tomatoes are very heavy feeders. There is no way that we could put down ahead of planting time enough nitrogen to supply the tomato for the entire crop. There are only two forms of nitrogen that a plant can take up, and that would be the ammonium form, plus charge, or the nitrate form, negative charge. You put those two together and you have the compound ammonium nitrate, which years ago was used to side dress field tomatoes, but it's very difficult to find now because of terroristic activities.
Because it's explosive.
That's right, it's very explosive. But tomatoes especially prefer their nitrogen in the nitrate form, to the point that excessive amounts of ammonium form can cause what's known as ammonium toxicity. This is manifest in a very severe case in necrosis of the leaves and stem, and often what we call blotchy ripening of the fruit. That can be a manifestation of excessive amounts of ammonium form. Now, it's important to point out that urea is hydrolyzed and then taken up by the plant as ammonium. So whenever you see urea on the fertilizer label, that is 100% ammonium form of nitrogen. Good tomato, or I should say astute tomato growers, will look at the nitrogen source in their tomato fertilizer, or look for a formula online, hopefully from a university, so that it has some credibility, that calls for most of the nitrogen in the nitrate form. And calcium nitrate, potassium nitrate are two excellent examples of fertilizer salts that are often used in blends of fertilizer that commercial growers use. They're not going to go down to the box stores or so forth and buy a little 8-ounce or 12-ounce package of fertilizer, which probably, even though it says tomato food on it, has most of its fertilizer nitrate in the ammonium form from urea.
So what's the good rule of thumb then for a home gardener? A
good ratio, and we can't get away usually from some amount of ammonium. Example being the cheapest, it's not the only, but the cheapest form of soluble phosphorus is diammonium phosphate. Uh-huh. So you're bringing along some ammonia molecules as you feed phosphorus. But a 60-40 is considered acceptable. 60% or above in the nitrate form, 40% or preferably below in the ammonium form. And a lot of the commercial blends will have that fairly closely met.
Okay.
Again, we can't economically do a 100% nitrate and still feed phosphorus because of the diammonium phosphate.
So how much should a home gardener put down on their tomatoes in?
Well,
total nitrogen.
Right. Whenever I should say, we talk about the ideal environment, and again, we get back to this I equals H times E. So now we're talking about the environment. Makes no difference if the plant has the genetic ability to produce the sugars, the acids, the volatile compounds, and so forth. We have got to provide the environment that will allow for that development. And from the standpoint of plant growth, I always tell my students everything starts in the soil. That's where the plants take up their nutrients. So number one for a home gardener in priority should be testing. It doesn't have to be yearly. I always point out when I give talks to home gardeners that commercialists do this yearly. It's so important to yield that they want to know every year what has changed since last year. With the soil test will come some recommendations. If the soil is deficient in something, then we do that, bring it, quote, up to test. And then whenever we plant our tomatoes, we would be advised to first of all put on a soluble form of phosphorus. Phosphorus is one of those things that in cool soil is not taken up very well by plants, including tomatoes.
They get that purple cast to them.
That's right. That is phosphorus deficiency. And many companies market what they call a plant starter special. Now I'll give you an analysis of one such company. It's 9-45-15. 45, the middle number being very high. Well, their thought here is, let's get some soluble phosphorus near those roots so the plant can take in phosphorus, develop a good root system, and then go from there with regard to absorbing things that are A, in the soil, or B, that we apply. So after that, we follow a fertilizer regimen commercially that would start off a bit leaner. Maybe we're talking about gasoline or so forth, and octane. A bit leaner, and then as the tomato sets fruits and starts to size those fruits, we give it more octane. We give it more nitrogen and so forth.
Nitrate form.
Nitrate form, exactly.
So the calcium nitrate's not just to keep blossom end rot from happening, it's also to give it a nitrate source.
Right. There is commercially a regimen that uses something that is low in nitrogen, fairly high in phosphorus, and very high in potassium, like 5-18-38. The potassium in excess, it has been found that excessive potassium adds to tomato flavor.
Wow.
And there are those who think that's like pre-salting our tomatoes. Potassium is a salt, and that this, if you will, excites the taste buds. But there are other things that we can tie with potassium to fruit internal quality and so forth. Well, getting back to the two fertilizers, 9-18-45 that alternated with calcium nitrate unless the grower has what we call a twin head injector. You can't put both fertilizers in one tank because you will precipitate out gypsum.
Calcium sulfate.
Yeah, about as soluble as concrete.
Yeah.
So it's back and forth and back and forth. And there now are companies that are packaging for homeowners this combination of calcium nitrate in one bag and 9-18-45 in another bag. So that would be the way to best follow what commercialists do. If people don't want to go to quite that trouble, try to find those salts, then what we do is start whenever the fruit begins to size, and the oldest fruits are about the size of the proverbial golf ball. We start side dressing them, and that simply means to place along the side of the plant a fertilizer source. In this fertilizer source, there's nothing better than calcium nitrate. And as such, if for whatever reason our plants look a little bit low in potassium or whatever else, then we put on potassium nitrate. But we do this on a weekly or 10-day basis throughout the life of the crop. Tomatoes are very heavy feeders. There is no way that we could put down ahead of planting time enough nitrogen to supply the tomato for the entire crop. Doing so would cause excessive amounts of very nice vegetative growth, beautiful vines, Last time I checked, nobody eats tomato vines.
No, they don't taste very good.
I would hope not. But one of the things that we look at whenever we hear the complaint, well, tomatoes aren't setting on plants. What's wrong? Excessive nitrogen can cause that.
But this year at the state fair where we had taste tests, I had a lot of folks say my tomatoes didn't set on. That could be temperature too.
Oh, absolutely. There are many things that can cause that.
It's 97 degrees after that.
Right. Tomato pollen starts to die at 92.
Okay.
When you get up to 97, it's just about all dead. So the only way to set the fruits would be to use something, and there commercially is a compound called Blossom Set, which is nothing more than gibberellic acid.
Okay.
Which mimics in the ovary of the tomato what the hormones produced by the pollen cell fertilizing the ovum would produce. So you do get tomato fruit. They're hollow, if you will, have no seeds, and you say, well, that's not bad. Well, no, it's not, but they're miserably shapen, and you could eat them yourself, of course, but they're really not that marketable because people want perfection.
That's right.
Uniformity.
That's right. Now, what about compost? A lot of our gardeners use compost. Now, what kind of in-source?
We've got to be a little bit careful with compost, Tim. First of all, we'll tell you that it's been about 5 years now, but we had gardeners and commercial growers coming to us with these weird symptoms on their tomato plants, young plants. And it was obvious that this is very characteristic of symptoms caused by herbicide exposure. Well, it came to be that we traced the source of the herbicide to broadleaf herbicides used on pastures. If I can name the active ingredient, picloram. I'll not name any brand names. Picloram does a great job of eliminating broadleaves so that you have nice grassy hay, or if it's used to pasture, nice forage. Unfortunately, it's very long-lived, and it has been shown that it's active enough after passing through the alimentary canal of a cow or especially a horse. Horse owners want perfect hay for their horses, so they go and buy that has been weed-free. And unfortunately, that's often because of the use of herbicides. Those herbicides are not destroyed in the composting process. So that if you use compost, if you use compost that's made from either cattle or horse bedding manure, and those animals have been fed hay or pasture that has been treated with one of these long-life herbicides, you're frankly killing your plant with kindness. Okay, so if you're going to use compost, and yes, compost does release some nutrients, but the primary reason for using compost is to improve soil structure.
Right.
Porosity, drainage.
Organic matter.
Yes. But please make sure you know the source of the compost, and you might even try to plant a few green bean seeds in it before you put it on your garden. Green beans are like the canary in the coal mine.
Okay, great.
For herbicides and compost.
Sure.
So we can use compost, but we mainly use it to improve the soil structure and not for the sake of plant nutrition. That we still, unless you're an organic gardener, go with synthetic fertilizers, which we feel to be a much safer way to fertilize tomatoes, knowing that they're instantaneously available and don't have to rely on microbial activity to be broken down into one of those two forms of nitrogen that plants can take up and I think most people who are organic don't realize that the plant cannot take up corn gluten meal. Mm-hmm. They can only take up nitrate or ammonium form, which soil microbes convert from corn gluten meal into one of those two forms.
Or manure or compost.
Manure we've got to be very careful with because it can be, quote, hot.
Yes,
being
too much.
Quite potent in nutrition. And let's remember, if those cows or so forth were pasturing on pichlorum-treated hay or grass, that's going to be the kiss of death for tomatoes.
Yes. Well, other nutrients, my father-in-law swore by Epsom salts.
Well, that's
magnesium sulfate.
Absolutely. And if I can refer back to those two bags, on the one bag of the analysis that's low in nitrogen, medium in phosphorus, high in potassium, it will tell you how much Epsom salts to add per unit weight of that. Because Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, we don't really need that much sulfur, but we need the magnesium. And you can't put the magnesium along with the calcium nitrate because then that will again cause nutrient antagonism, it's called. But no, Epsom salts is a very good source of tomato fertilizer because tomatoes are very heavy feeders and magnesium is a macronutrient. A lot of it needed. And it's often overlooked because it's not one of the big three, N, P, and K, on the bag. And very few people who sell things will add more to the bag other than what they have to. And the analysis, let's say 20-10-20, has to be N, P, and K. Anything else in there would be reflected by the label, but I can promise you there probably isn't much else in there, which is fine. We can add it.
We're finding in other studies that sulfur is becoming more and more important because we've cleaned our air up, which is great.
Right.
We used to get about 30 pounds of sulfur every year.
Correct.
Now we have it for about 20. It's starting to show up a little bit.
That's a good point.
Well, is there any other tidbits that you want to tell us about how to get that really good tasting tomato?
Well, there is discussion as of late with regard to how long do you leave the tomato on the vine. You know, the selling point at farmers markets for any locally grown produce is vine ripened. Now, studies have shown that there isn't that much more sugar or acid that's added to the fruit after what's called the blush stage. But that does not or did not take into account these volatile flavor compounds. And I would argue that 99 people out of 100 will tell you that a vine-ripened tomato is much more flavorful than anything that they would pick green and allow to ripen on their windowsill.
Right.
So there are things that must be happening that have yet to be discovered. But there does become a point when the danger of letting it on the vine in some squirrel fight they get before you do
yes,
is greater than the amount of flavor that's going to be added in the extra day or two. And we usually suggest that it should be fully red, but yet somewhat firm to the squeeze or touch and not allowed to be overly ripe.
You know, our conversation has solved a mystery for me. A good friend of mine, Larry Mayfield, came to our tomato tasting, our tomato fest, big tomato grower. He said, I hate to tell you this, my tomatoes taste a lot better than yours. And you know what in-source I used? Urea.
Oh, Tim.
I didn't know that. N is what I thought.
I will say this. In the summer, under field conditions, when the weather is warm, microbial activity is very high. So the ammonium form that is from urea is going to be converted by nitrifying bacteria to the nitrate form. But it still isn't a good idea.
Right.
And we can't rely on microbes to do everything for us. And it's so easy to find calcium nitrate, potassium nitrate. Be careful with sodium nitrate. You can find that. It's very cheap. But that adds to the salinity of the fertilizer solution that you're putting on. And, of course, sodium can lead to what's called a sodic soil condition if we use it in excess. If I can put a plug in for extension, the homepage for extension is the word extension .missouri.edu. Up will pop a search engine, a box, I should say. You type into that box, let's say tomato nutrition, and up will pop all of our publications that have anything at all to do with how to fertilize tomatoes. So that's a very easy way to get dependable resource information about anything having to do with gardening. Case in point, how to grow the best home garden tomatoes.
All right. I guess I should have read those. Okay. Now, we've learned a lot about tomatoes today, but I want you to mark your calendar for early September, because that's when the Central Missouri Week and Jefferson Farm and Garden, through Extension, will host a tomato festival. The exact day is not set yet, but we will have tasting with our different tomatoes, and we'll do some comparisons between some of the cultural practices that we've talked about today, so that you can make those decisions and help you make that really good tasting tomato. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This is it for Tim's Take. So join us next month.